Hello, everybody. We're joined once again by Richard. This is not his grand return. We're still waiting for the grand return, but we were going to talk about AOT 1 year on. And Richard came to me after our last UVS kind of discussion, I'm going to go with, and said, the next time you want to talk about UVS, get me on. I was like, yeah, sure. Richard's got some very strong opinions about the changes, and given that this weekend is literally 1 year since the release of AOT, I wanted to talk about the AOT changes and blindside Cameron with this as we talk about everything that AOT's kind of brought in, how the company has made AOT and the game around the players, and how we're feeling about that compared to how we felt a year ago. So I'm once again joined by Cameron, who has had his pre-releases, and joined by Richard, who is fresh off your pre-release.
Yeah, we had ours Friday night. A bit of a change because obviously we had, late like everyone else in the UK. So we decided to have like a cheeky Friday night one, which was actually quite fun.
Nice.
But yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, not my my full return. I just figured I'd come back and rant for a couple of hours, then piss off again. So
exactly.
Sometimes you just need to get it out of your system.
Exactly, and then leave you back in the hands of Budget Richard.
Well, I mean, this is probably going to be the last UK versus stream for a few weeks. It's not fully set in stone, but we should be starting the move process next week. So, yeah, I've got some pre-recorded content. I've got some content I need to edit and get uploaded quickly to kind of make the gap not as long. But as I've been talking the last few weeks, I will be going on forced hiatus while I change homes and get everything set up in there. Make sure everything's running smoothly before coming back to this hobby that pays nothing.
Yet.
Yes. We are now membership affiliated on YouTube with the full uncut Bake Off finals on there. So with some other videos that I put up onto there that didn't make it onto the main channel. So if you want to go check out more of me, it's all on the membership. And if you want to support the channel, you can do it through there. At the behest of YouTube, of the UK versus R&D, I will be doing some more stuff on my return, so it'll be kind of like a second win for the channel. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about AOT 1 year on. So let's go back a year. Richard was still on the podcast. We were talking about
halcyon days.
We were talking about the changes coming in, and Cameron was frantically recording lots of videos with all these lovely new abilities coming in. How did we feel a year ago compared to now? And let's start off with Richard, who will have the longest monologue.
Man. So I feel like, if I'm being completely honest, the words that spring to mind are mitigated disaster. So, but I want to try and be, constructive about this, right?
Yeah.
This isn't just I want to come on the podcast to just bash UVS for a couple of hours and then piss off again.
As long as if we can keep it as constructive as possible, that'd be great.
Well, yeah, that was the plan.
Be honest.
That was the plan, honestly.
Well, you haven't been here for a while, so.
Exactly. I've got to get out of my system. So, and I guess with that comes a caveat of what is judged as success, right? Because, I don't, and I guess most people don't see, their account books, right? In terms of from UVS, and their player numbers and how much has gone out of the warehouse and blah, 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 and how much they've sold, all this sort of stuff. So from their perspective, in terms of numbers and growing the game and stuff, it might have been a success. However, I think both personally in how I felt the game has changed, and very much so locally in terms of the play group, they have hated AOT. Realistically, I think it's been a very visceral reaction to it. So there's a whole bunch of things that changed, right? And that was sort of one of the things that I think we came away from the summit, the first summit I believe was. They're sure taken a lot of swings, right? They took a lot of risks. They tried a lot of new things almost all at once. And I think we came away hopeful that they were going to work. I think
cautiously optimistic is the best way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, cautiously optimistic that we were aware that they were taking risks. Well, there were some things we weren't sure about. Some of the things that I think initially we had a lot better views on than I certainly do now. So, I guess try and tackle it sort of one by one, really. So,
Yes.
theming wise,
this is just for like the initial one. I've got like breakdowns so we can talk about each topic.
But yeah, I would say we've kept our play group together pretty much, but Attack on Titan, people just don't really want to play it or necessarily buy it or play with those cards. Like Critical Role was such a sort of a shot in the arm for the play group locally in terms of just how fun and how well designed that set was. And then getting AOT 3 was another massive come down afterwards. And then, I guess part of we can come on later in sort of the future and sort of trends and stuff. But certainly, I just think people are fed up of Attack on Titan locally. There's a lot about it they're not enjoying. But yeah, we can get, I guess, into specifics. Yeah. But I think a lot of the things they've tried, at least in my opinion, again, I don't sort of attribute any sort of malfeasance or malpractice or anything on their part, right? Again, obviously they want things to succeed. They thought these were good ideas. I just don't think pretty much any of them have worked in the long run.
Yeah, they're not going to maliciously try and damage their own game,
right? And fair play for trying and all that, but I think for me, pretty much all of them haven't worked. Now, yeah, so I guess we can go on to maybe I guess what Cam feels as an overarching thing.
Yeah. How do you feel about AOT now compared to a year ago?
A year ago, I felt tired because, like you said, I was having to make a whole bunch of content specifically just around all of the brand new mechanics they were bringing to the game. And while Richard was talking, I was listening, but I also looked back. How long ago? Because I obviously don't know when certain sets were released, but how long before AOT was Jetburn released?
They've pretty much stuck to the same release schedule.
It was almost a year before that, right?
Jetburn was November. It was just before Nationals. Undaunted Raid was about this time last year.
Okay. So about a year before AOT, we had Jetburn, which for the most part didn't change anything mechanically, but we did get the whole rebrand and they changed all the symbols, they changed how the cards look. And I remember people being really iffy about that. And then we had good sets like Yu Yu Hakusho, we got some Challenger Series, we got Girl Power, and then we got Attack on Titan just a little over a year after, or under a year after, and there's even more changes. Not only are we having less symbols, and now we've got this new Blitz keyword and other new keywords, and I think it was trying to be too many changes too soon, and I think if the set hadn't been as experimental, they tried maybe half of these changes, maybe it's we're going to show transforming characters and shift, and we're gonna limit symbols, and then they add Blitz to the next set, or hey, we're gonna slowly roll these things out. I think it might have been a little easier to swallow that, and AOT 1 was just an unholy sized set, and that made even buying cases really difficult because you still weren't getting everything. So I think with everything they tried to do in AOT, it just felt like that we were overwhelmed as players. We had to learn a whole bunch of new different things, and then some of them weren't even printed properly on the cards, like with Shift. Initially, the way all of them but one was worded is you could just stuff it in your card pool and transform it at the end of the turn. And I think there was only one Shift attack that had it worded properly. But then having to explain how blitzes work to newer players, and it really felt like a struggle. It felt like even established players were having to play catch up, and that's not a good feeling, especially when you're more active players, your more established players are the anchors of your game, trying to get new people invested. And I know they said they were focusing on like draft and all of that, but when you design sets like that, a lot of like more established players think that half the set's then unusable, and it kind of feels like a waste of time and money at that point. And so you get into like the more and more power ramped things of like Apocalypse when you have Falling Titans and the Rumbling. And it feels very, I don't know, it feels very too much sometimes.
Yeah.
And I've weathered on it a little bit better now. I still don't think Blitz needed to happen. I really don't. I don't think Blitz needed to be printed at all. But
Hard agree.
But you know, it's I'm glad they took chances. I don't think they needed to take this many chances a year after completely rebranding the game, when a lot of people were already kind of shaky. Like, okay, we changed that up. We've got a few sets. Yu Yu Hakusho Dark Tournament was a huge success, but a lot of that was probably done before all of this, and they just like changed the aesthetic of it. But I don't know. It felt like they hit us with way too much too fast, and a lot of us were struggling to keep up. And then with only half of the cards being like viable for the most part, it felt like there was a lot we had to deal with and not a lot of reward we were getting out of it.
No,
Yeah,
makes sense.
I think you could probably sum it up in an Ian Malcolm gif, however you want to pronounce it, of, you know, they were far too concerned with whether they could, they didn't stop to think whether they should.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So let's break it down and start off with what AOT was intended to, kind of what TMNT is intended to do this year, and that is the onboarding product. So let's talk about how AOT's new play experience was.
Horrific.
I don't have any insights into this because I don't have a local play area, but you guys have got established stars, established communities. Did you see any kind of uptick or downtick for AOT, and did new players coming in respond well to to these changes that we've been talking about?
No, like, so again, I think they failed on this on multiple fronts, right? So first off, right, obviously there was almost like the backlash from it in terms of set size, blank card, blah blah blah, from the sort of entrenched players, which is never going to be good vibes for a new player coming in, right? The demo was fine, actually. Like, I think the scripted demo was okay. Didn't necessarily maybe go far enough in terms of just how complex this game is, but I thought it was okay onboarding experience. The Clash deck for AOT, unmitigated disaster, horrific product that no one should ever bought. It was possibly, I'm trying to think whether it's worse than the Class Union stuff. No, the Class Union stuff had actually stuff in it you could use. Yep, it's the worst product they've ever made. And just didn't do what it was supposed to do. I think, and I guess Blitz sort of ties into this as the new player thing, because again, coming away from the summit, Blitz was primarily a way of lightening the mental load, right? In terms of easing that attack step for a player. You know, they play the attack, the Blitz happens, the attack does what it does, and then they continue. And so they all can almost then like not worry too much about the attack and worry about their stage from then on. And that's okay. I think if you look at it from a mile up kind of thing, but once you actually get close and think about it, it doesn't work, because you've still got enhancers you have to have on attacks, like stun, powerful, etc. You've still got keywords you need to worry about. You've still got other things you sort of have to do as enhanced. Still got responses and static. So it doesn't really take away too much mental load. And actually, it probably adds more, because now they've got to understand what enhancers do and blitzes do. So, like, I don't think it added anything from that perspective in terms of, no newer player, from my perspective, I've ever spoken to, has ever thought that it made it easier and actually was more complicated. I think it's made the enhanced step just sort of worse. Like, the first player, the attacking player effectively gets two enhances, right? Before the next player goes. I think it takes a bit of nuance away from that. Like, I think it takes some nuance away from attacks of, I know, if you ask Tim Keefe, he hates the idea of enhanced chicken, but I think there is room for some amount of that and being
We'll get more into this when we talk about Blitz.
Yeah, I
directly.
think there's. I mean, okay, we can get more on Blitz, but I think, yeah, and certainly locally, no one really gave a shit about the IP. So we effectively had one player join, but he had already sort of bought some packs, so they came to the demo. We had a couple of players that came, haven't really come back. They pipe up in our locals group chat every so often, but they haven't really shown up to events. So AOT hasn't grown the game at all from my perspective. Obviously, to really get a feel for that, you need a much more holistic view in terms of looking at UVS's account sheet sort of thing and what they sold and stuff. But as a product, because the product was so almost devalued, right? No one really wanted to open AOT. I think there was a lot of negative feelings towards it. I feel that sort of makes it, it lessens that hype for getting into it, right? If you don't have those entrenched players like really wanting to do this stuff, they're really hyped about it, and therefore building that enthusiasm for other players to get involved. I think that you're failing to do it there. So I think as that onboarding experience, just don't think it works. Like Spotlight just hasn't happened again, and maybe you've got that separately. But again, the design for that was as a more new player friendly thing. No one wants to play Spotlight, and the play groups are not big enough to have both, right? You can't, there might be 2 or 3 play groups in the world that maybe could support some people playing standard, some people playing Spotlight.
I know Spotlight has been quite popular in regional side events. I know ours aren't quite big enough to support like massive pods, but I know the AOT.
And that's fine from a side event perspective, but the whole point of Spotlight was to be this onboarding format, right? And it just didn't work because no one wants to play it. And the only reason people might play a side event is because they can get prize wall tickets, right? And it might be a little bit of an interesting throwaway thing, but no one cared about it. No one's invested in it. I don't see anyone screaming from the top of the lungs wanting to play Spotlight. It's just like, man.
I know Spotlight's quite popular down in Southampton. Their store's closed, so they're playing a lot more casually, and they just want to play with their My Hero cards. So, like, Aaron wants to play Shigaraki, and like, Shigaraki 3 is great, but he wants to play Shigaraki 1. So they'll play a lot of Spotlight.
Well, that's My Hero Spotlight, right? And that's less wanting to play Spotlight and more we would just want to play with old cards, right? They want to play Spanish Standard or whatever you want to call it, right? So, like, that isn't we want to play Spotlight because it's this cool, interesting format, and also we can bring these new players on. It's like, no, it was almost dead in the water from the beginning. So
I have a question. I put it into a video myself about a way to change Spotlight. What if they change Spotlight events from the event being IP locked to your deck being IP locked?
I don't think so.
No, because again, there are certain IPs that are either intrinsically stronger or deeper that people will just play those to win rather than playing AOT because they like AOT, right?
But you get to play AOT because you like AOT, and I get to play, say, My Hero because I like My Hero. You get to play TMNT. Like I said, it's not meant to be a hyper competitive event. It's meant to be, I like this character, I like this IP, I'm going to play it for fun.
Sure. But if I'm paying money to enter a tournament, I want to win, right? To an extent. Like, I'm not going to turn up with Godzilla Spotlight, right? And have this sort of, when I could play, say, Yu Spotlight and play Walk the Dogs and Battle Auras and crap, right? Or My Hero Spotlight and have access to a bajillion sets, or Critical Role Spotlight because I've got a bit more depth there, or whatever and whatever and whatever. I think Spotlight is a fine as a kind of alternate casual thing you can do, but as a side event for regionals or bigger things, and if some stores caught on with it, then cool. If people enjoy it, fine. I'm not trying to harsh their buzz, but I think for the most part, people just didn't care about Spotlight. It was never going to fire, and therefore didn't achieve that goal of it being this onboarding format.
How about you, Cam?
Yeah,
how was Spotlight? How has AOT been for your local growth?
It's been a net zero. We haven't gained anyone. We haven't lost anyone. But you know how we did get new players? Critical Role in TMNT. We've got at least 4 new players from TMNT that have done demos with us and are looking into, finding time to come out and play. Critical Role, we've had more people come up and ask about the game and stuff. But AOT, we had nothing. So that tells me either we missed the boat when it comes to the hype of, when AOT was at the height of its popularity. Now, I get that that's a really difficult thing to map out time-wise, especially when you're dealing with IPs and legal stuff, but we could have just missed the boat. And then I think it didn't help that we got 2 sets back-to-back of AOT, then one set that wasn't, and then another set that was. So it just feels like we were kind of bogged down. I get that we were able to ride that hype with My Hero, but I think My Hero's a bigger, more popular IP than AOT. So I think we had
that's a bold
general
thing
numbers.
to say.
General numbers.
I think maybe part of it is more that My Hero's a more fun IP.
And it's more accessible.
Quite a bleak one, right?
Yeah.
In terms of the story, in terms of what's going on,
AOT is a bit more adult, and My Hero's a bit more aimed at the kids and the teen crowd, which is kind of where you pick up a lot of newer players. So I think we just kind of missed the boat there, and I would agree that Spotlight is great if all sets were created equal. But because you have different design teams working on different sets and they don't exactly have the same philosophy, AOT Apocalypse was not designed with the same mind as Turtles. You can tell by power level, by design, it's very obvious. So if you have your AOT Spotlight Hanji 1 with 9 Titans versus a TMNT Spotlight deck, I think we know how that's going to go no matter who the TMNT players play.
Yeah,
but I think part of the IP thing there, right, is we're a character-driven game, right? Yeah. That is your main focus. So that's the thing that's always in play. That's who your deck is built around. And a lot of people will just play a character because they freaking love that character, right?
Unless you're me, yeah.
My son just wanted to play Denki all the time because he loved Denki. Or, someone, or Gary loves playing Toru because he just likes, whatever. Or I liked playing Tokiyami because it was this emo little bird that was just a stupid aggro character, right? And I feel like AOT didn't have any of that, right? The characters were mostly faceless. And I think in terms of the fan bases, I think My Hero, it's a lot easier to gravitate to a character and really like them. Whereas I think with AOT, and even for a casual person, I didn't give a crap about AOT, about My Hero, but I could at least gel with some of those characters. With AOT, they're just faceless cards. I don't really care. They just got stats and numbers on them. And unless you're probably a hardcore AOT fan, I think you're much less likely to get invested in a character as opposed to mechanics of the character, right? And I think that's a big part of it. Part of it, you want to be... it's a character game. You want to enjoy the character. You want to, get the shiny version because you really love playing this character, even if they're bad, right? Sometimes you don't care. You just want to play, Tokiyami 2 because you love Tokiyami. So I'm going to play the legal version, even though it's terrible, right? And I think My Hero had a much more attractive character base in terms of being able to kind of gel with a character or find this cool character and go with that. Whereas AOT, they're just all bleh.
I think it also helps that My Hero had a much wider character base and a more array of different characters, whereas opposed to AOT, we kind of got the same characters every set, just retooled and reskinned.
Yeah.
But another reason I think Spotlight didn't really take off, even though it is supposed to be like the learning thing, we are the only IP. Okay, I'm gonna say this as a fact, even though I'm not entirely sure, but we are the only IP-based game that allows you to mix and match your IPs. And if I'm gonna play a game that's restricting me to I can only play all of these cards with their own IP, I could just go play Union Arena and play with like Jujutsu Kaisen and Full Metal Alchemist and stuff that we don't have. Whereas opposed to here, I get to mix and match my stuff.
I mean,
and that's like that's the coolest part for me, and that's a big selling point.
Well, Magic isn't
doesn't count.
IP
Magic is
driven.
everything.
Magic isn't IP driven. They could. I mean, we just had Edge of Eternities from MTG, which is their own IP, bringing in their own stuff from space.
They're dipping into that space,
yeah,
right?
We got the Wakandan thing of we don't do that here.
Yeah, but it just makes me think of, because this is kind of a big selling point of the game, is you can mix and match all of these worlds and characters together. Why would you then create a format that says now you don't get to do that?
Yeah,
and I get it's supposed to be for easier for like newer players who are just starting with their favorite IP, but it just like
you're losing part of the joy of the game, right? You're just losing.
If that's how you want, we tell people if that's how you want to start, absolutely dive in head first, build all the TMNT characters you want.
Yeah.
But eventually branch out and try some other stuff, because that'll help you get better at the game proper.
And again, I think it's a fun thing to maybe have spots of at a side event, right? Of, hey, we've just released the Critical Role sets. We're going to do some Critical Role Spotlight with, you can play, those in the challenge decks. Or we've just released the Dark Deku ones. We're going to do some My Hero Spotlight. You have those as like, these Spotlight, these side events that people could just have a little bit of a different deck building challenge and come back to it and stuff. But I think as an onboarding thing, I think again you're restricting one of the joys of the game from that learning experience.
Yeah, I agree.
That makes a lot of sense. From my personal opinion, when Stronghold was still open, when I went down there, when I could get down there, it wasn't the Universus players that were buying AOT. It was the One Piece players and the Yu-Gi-Oh players and the Pokemon players and the players that were looking for the value, because you had the signed chromes. That's what they were hunting, because they had this card they thought was going to be insanely valuable, because it's the only kind of instance of the creator's signature being on cards. People were buying it for that, and it kind of reminded me of Heroes Clash. The first time we had the crumbs and people were overbuying product, and it made the price of the cards completely drop, because we were just flooded with we were flooded with these cards.
Yeah,
we didn't have that with AOT because the set was huge, and it is something they have learned from, and it's something it seems they've been able to talk to, or possibly talk to Riot about. And if you look at the Riftbound booster packs, you get 2 rare cards, 1 parallel foil in their 14 card booster packs for their 300 card set, which is insane value. So it does look like they've learned from the massive set about pull rates, and they've told us we're not going to be getting any more of them, which is an absolutely huge win. But
that is very much just their first set, so it makes sense for theirs to be bigger, because that is literally ground zero, right? Whereas we didn't have that here.
But that's what a lot of people thought AOT was. It was kind of like an unofficial relaunch of the game. That's why it came in with all these huge swings and all stuff. Like, we had the card back and stuff changes back in November 2023, and then this August, our on-setting set, this is like an unofficial relaunching of the game. We got the new demo situation. We got all the new onboarding stuff. They pushed AOT hard. I think that was the first time we had like a cinematic trailer for the set, and that trailer was actually really good.
Yeah, I just think maybe it was just the wrong IP for it. I think maybe it's
Yeah,
just
I could see that.
I think it's
Because
probably
I didn't
just
know
a bit
anyone
too
who gave a
fucking
damn about
depressing,
AOT.
man. Like AOT just isn't a joyous set, right? It's not a joyous world. Everyone dies. Everyone gets smashed to bits by Titans, and it's obviously got it's never beaten the Nazi allegations. Um, there's just a lot about it that isn't joyful, and like whereas you have that in My Hero. Sure, there's some dark crap in it, but also
But it's
like
hopeful.
you've got like the school kids doing stupid stuff at superhero academy and having fun doing fun stuff and having like Olympic games or whatever. Like there's joy within these sets, whereas like and again Critical Role has you've got silliness, you've got fun.
I mean,
AOT doesn't have that.
even into the art of the cards themselves, it felt more limited. It feels like on the outliers of what creative we're doing. If we
Yeah.
look at the
Yeah,
alt
it
arts,
felt very flat.
yeah, if we look at the alt arts of AOT, it's all manga posters or manga covers. Then we look at the alt arts for Critical Role, and it's bespoke art. It's dual chromatic shading ones. So in the AOT, we've got the history of AOT, the solo leveling, having the chibi and the action shots, and My Heroes alt arts and XRs boasting more dynamic versions of the cards. And with AOT, it's like, cool, here's the manga panel, here's the manga poster. It's like design did a great job of making the cards look good with what they had, but the other stuff looks better.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think
and-
that's also just limiting to what they were able to get the licenses to.
Yeah.
But
Again, with what they were working with, I thought
Let me
like
pose
it
a
was actually
question to
decent.
Richard here.
What's that? Sorry.
Let me pose a question to Richard here. Do you think if instead of AOT taking all these big swings, do you think this would have been better if Critical Role took all of these swings? Because I think it's a much more beloved IP, and I
Yes,
think
but not
people would
enough.
be more forgiving of that.
I would say yes, but not enough. I think
Not
so.
enough?
Partly, it's I think the world, right? I think there's limitations in the world in terms of you can't inject this joy. You've got obviously you're working with a source material which within its own like oeuvre, right? Within like manga or anime or whatever, like it is what it is, and it's obviously people love it, the story, the storytelling, the artwork, all that stuff, right? But then trying to translate that into a game and like mechanically, sure, some of the things really worked, but also it's lacking that joy, that fun, right? Because we're playing a game, and I think that's part of it. Looking back at it, I think that's part of it. It's just a lot of AOT is really, really depressing, right? It's not fun. People are just getting smashed to bits or kicked.
A lot of Critical Role is very depressing.
Sure, but you also have
But I haven't
cards
got to
that
that
are
part
just
yet,
like
so
a few of
it's
the
okay.
characters pissing in a corner, or whatever, right? Like and because it's D&D, you have like endless D&D tropes to interject joy and fun and whimsy. That means you can have fun with it, right? Yeah, sure. There's people getting heads cut off or whatever, or like I'm sure you could make cards which Grog are just smashing a head into, or whatever. Sure, there's going to be brutal and dark stuff you could put into it, but you don't need to have that. Whereas basically there isn't anything else in Attack on Titan. Everyone dies, everyone's trapped, everyone's like starving, whatever. Again, I don't really know the story other than the fact that basically everyone dies, right? Whereas, and I think maybe it would have been an easier pill to swallow with Critical Role because of the IP. But I think fundamentally a lot of the swings just were wrong. And so I think no matter what IP you put on it, I still don't think you succeed with those things. Like, I think even if you change the IP and that AOT 1 set is Critical Role, with all the things it did, like introducing Blitz, I think Blitz is still bad, whether it's AOT, whether it's with Critical Role. And, we can get on to other things. I think they're still bad, whether they are, no matter the IP.
That's fair. But yeah, let's. I did have some other stuff before, but yeah, let's get into that then. Let's talk about Blitz. So, as Richard said earlier on, Blitz was pitched to us at the first summit by Bill as essentially going, it sucks when you have enhancers on cards or you have cards that you play and they don't get to do what they wanted to do. Your opponent does something before you, your opponent kind of interacts with it, or you're setting up your enhance, and then you just don't get to do it. So Blitz was introduced as a way for attacks to do what they're supposed to do. A way for you to, before enhances, before anything went down, your attack did what it was supposed to do, and then you moved into the enhanced step, and then you start fighting over the actual rest of the attack. And in a new player term, to me, that made sense. Going, cool, this is my card, this is what it does, I play it, and then my opponent can try to stop it or stuff. It made sense. What didn't make sense to me was introducing ways to interact with Blitz, or having everything be a Blitz. If you had something you wanted to make sure this attack did, then make it a Blitz. Sure, Sweeping Daggers, perfect example of a Blitz. You need this card to copy another card in the discard before your opponent is able to manipulate the discard and get rid of the target. That makes sense for a Blitz. Removing another dagger card from your own discard to burn could have been an enhance. Could have allowed you to find your own way to set that up, because you've now created a situation where your attack doesn't get to do what it was supposed to do if you don't have a dagger in there. So it's the exact same problem as enhance, you've just changed the timing.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're not doing everything as a Blitz, then why bother at all, right?
Well,
Which is sort of the issue.
You could do the same thing as response. You could just go, oh, when I play this attack, I get to do all this stuff and have no enhances.
Sure, but what I'm saying is like that you don't really want to be mixing up blitzes and enhances, because then otherwise, what is the point? What is Blitz actually doing for you?
Well,
right?
Frenzy. Frenzy's a perfect example of a Blitz. I think Frenzy's a great Blitz.
Could have been a response, right? Again, or it could have been an enhance, right? Again, it could have been one of these things. So I think Blitz is very much all or nothing, right? If you're not doing all as Blitz and you're doing some and some, then you're not gaining anything for Blitz, because you still need to understand how other things work, right? And you could just leave them as enhances, and you just play that as your first enhance if you want your attack to do the thing. Like, what's the big deal? Like, you're not gaining anything. The whole point of Blitz is that my attack, it does the thing, we continue onwards, right? And you have to do the Blitz as the first thing. But if you're then splitting that up with having other things that aren't Blitzes, again, it just makes it more confusing. So you're not gaining any benefit from having Blitz. But then if you've got everything as Blitz, again, if you're designing from the ground up, right? If AOT 1 was the first set ever printed, right? Then all of a sudden you have to rethink it, and it's like, okay, so how do we factor in powerful EX stun, etc., into a Blitz world? But I think because you are inherently locked into having to sort of mix the two, because you can't really get rid of stun, powerful, or EX, or anything else, you've now got this sort of extra layer of understanding what's on an attack. So you're not really gaining anything. Sure, there's that almost that mental shortcut of, yeah, I play the attack, I do the Blitz, and then we continue, my attack does what it does. But is that really enough of a gain to warrant the extra overhead of having to teach in a new player of, okay, so you then do the Blitz and then you do the enhances, and it also then leads to the sort of gotcha situations of that I've done many a time, and most people just laughed and said no, where I go play my attack Blitz, you enhance, and they go, okay, pass, go to block, kind of thing. Whereas actually, it's play the Blitz, I go to mine. And so you're leaving those sort of gotcha moments in there, right? Of people forgetting that there is, I get effectively 2 enhances before you go.
Well, minimum of 2. But before our new player expert chimes in on this, I think you're right in there. But for me, the big change, the issue for me with that is you don't just get to do that anymore. You don't just get to go play my attack blitzes, move on to enhance, because you've got high speed dodge and aerial goblin bolt. So now you have to go, I go to blitz, any responses? No, cool. I'll go to my second blitz, any responses? And you've now just added more timing windows. You've now...
because you don't want them uninteractable, right? You want to have cards that interact with blitzes in the same way you had cards that had enhances. You want the game to have interaction.
Yeah, but if you
So-
want the attack to do something, you want to go, this attack is guaranteed to do this one thing, that's what Blitz should be. Anything else should be an enhance. Anything extra you're adding onto it should be enhanced. So I go, cool. Like my Sweeping Dagger example, I want Sweeping Daggers to be a copy of another attack. That's its Blitz. But getting the burn damage from having another daggers in my discard doesn't need to be a Blitz. It can be an enhance. You can interact with that, that's fine. But this attack is designed to do this one thing. You're not going to get to interact with it. You're not going to get to do anything with it. This is what the attack's designed to do. But there's another part you do get to interact with. Blitz shouldn't have interactions, in my opinion, because the entire purpose of it is to go, this attack gets to do what it's meant to do. The moment you introduce the interaction ability, the moment you introduce going to your opponent going, I need to let you interact with these blitzes before I move on, you're making it more complicated than it needs to be, and you're taking away from what the initial design and initial selling point of Blitz was.
Yeah. So, but given you probably don't want to have this thing in a game where it can be uninteractable, you want those points of interaction, and then at that point it's like, well, actually, what's Blitz actually fucking doing for me? And so just throw it away. Like, I just think Blitz is, unfortunately, it might be something that they've kind of priced themselves into now. I don't know. But I would just throw it away and forget we ever did it and pretend like Blitz never happened.
Let's move over to our new play expert to talk about Blitz and how you found it, with how complicated it was or wasn't for new players.
It definitely took a lot of explaining, even to my more established folk. There's been a lot of points where people have gone into enhances and forgot about their Blitz because they were just used to attacks having enhances. I think I could swallow Blitz as a thing if we did three things. Give it its own step. It doesn't need to be part of the enhanced step, because you can get around it as is with things like Flash, which if the attack's supposed to do the thing, then let's just go response, Blitz step, enhance step. Don't like you said, don't make everything a Blitz. Use Blitz sparingly. Not every attack has to have a Blitz. It can be mostly enhances, and then, like this ultra rare Sweeping Daggers, it's powerful because it has this Blitz on it. And 3, like you said, take away the interaction, and that's why you should use it sparingly. Not every attack has to have an uninteractable thing, but maybe some more powerful cards or some more like combo build around centric abilities can have that, and that's where you can put it on like ultra rares or even rares, and then your commons and uncommons could just have normal enhances, and you can still put enhances on everything else, and that could be your interaction. But I think making it at the beginning of the enhanced step, where it's like, yeah, we're going into the enhanced step, you got to do the Blitz, not the enhances, then enhances, is backwards. Just give it its own step between response and enhance, and use it more sparingly. Not everything has to be a Blitz, because that, like you said, can be very confusing to new people. But like Frenzy, I like Frenzy as a keyword, but put it in the Blitz step and not the enhanced step, because blitzes can just, they added way more like problematic timing things when they're talking about lessening our mental load, and I'm not gonna let those articles go. Those articles saying we're gonna reduce your mental load.
We will get onto mental load.
If you're using it sparingly, right, and you're just then what's Blitz actually doing for you? It's not achieving its stated goal of making things easy. So why are we bothering? Because
I think they got Blitz wrong. I don't think it should be every attack should be able to do at least one thing guaranteed. I think that you should use it more of like a power scaling thing of, this is more powerful because it has this uninteractable thing, and that's where you could put, like, you can level things off, like, there's these really high dollar ultra rares that are really strong, but this uncommon has a really cool Blitz, and that's going to help me as a budget player to keep up with some of these more higher value cards, and you could use it like that to kind of balance the design of the game. Instead of everything has Blitz, it's all uninteractable, or maybe it is, which kind of defeats the purpose, but it feels like they kind of backtracked on design a little bit for Blitz when they realized just how powerful it could be, and it just feels like it's in a very wishy-washy state, and I don't like it. I even complained to my newer players that I taught at the TMNT thing. They were like, what's the difference in the colors here? I'm like, not to get me started, but it's like, you have to do this Blitz during the enhanced step. They said, well, isn't there a Blitz step? And I slapped the table, slapped my forehead, and almost walked away. And my local's like, don't get him started. He teaches this game, and he's been at odds with a lot of these changes since. But I was able to break it down for them, and they understood. But they also understood where my frustration was coming from, because they're like, that doesn't make sense. I'm like, thank you.
So, like, fundamentally, it was designed as a way of simplifying and streamlining for newer players. And I think what it's done is the exact opposite. Like, it wasn't designed, at least, I guess how it was sold to us, as a power level thing. It wasn't there as we want to put some of these things that are just uninteractive, what you get to do is almost like a super first enhance, right? It was never, again, to the best of our knowledge, was never designed that way. The idea was to streamline the attack step and make things easier for newer players. Whereas, in my opinion, which is never wrong, obviously, it's done the exact opposite.
Yeah, which is why we're saying it should be used as a power scaling, because it's not achieved the goal it was intended with. We're agreeing with you by saying Blitz.
Yeah, I just think you just get rid of it. I just think at that point you just like, okay, it's failed, move on.
Well, honestly, I would be more happy with that if we did get rid of Blitz as a concept. But I'm saying if we molded it to where its own step, it's used more sparingly, and it's used more as a power scaling thing, I'd be able to swallow that pill a little bit easier.
Well, this brings... I'm going to kind of segue us on to the next topic, whilst also talking about an example of how Blitz could be used. Richard, you brought up the critical role set being like an injection of life into the local community. I'm on record saying I think Critical Role is the best design set of the year, and it most likely will be. And I think that's because of the moderation used. We're going to move on to attunement and the attuned cards, and Critical Role used attuned in a very interesting way. Critical Role had the higher level cards be non-attuned. They have these kind of signature abilities for characters, and that is something Blitz could do. I do think Blitz could be very good in starter decks or demo decks, but if it was used in moderation, if it was sprinkled in rather than being everything in there, similar to how Attuned was done in Critical Role, it would be more palatable. But rather than just forcing it on every ability, even if that ability works better or makes more sense as an enhance.
Yeah.
But,
and that might be a way of kind of almost backdooring out a Blitz later on, of just using it sparingly in that way.
But let's move on to attunement and attuned. And I know Richard has got a nice long speech about how much they love and admire the design team and creative for creating attuned, and how it has improved and made deck building so much better.
Man, yeah. I was so hopeful for attuned. Honestly, it was one of the things I thought was actually maybe one of the cooler things, and actually was an interesting way of getting around the sort of problem they created themselves for reducing the symbols in the set, right? That was like one of the big moments from the summit, was when they announced actually there's only 6 symbols. And it was like, then how the heck are you doing that? Like, what's going on? And obviously then they explained how they were doing it with Attuned, and we were like, okay, unsure, but like, again, cautiously optimistic. But I mean, and I think, I don't know whether you were planning on doing this separate, but I think it kind of goes hand in hand with the reduction in symbols, right? Because I think one sort of predicates the other.
I thought we'd cover the reduction in symbols between this and the next topic.
Yeah, like I think the reductions in symbols is almost what forced their hand with Attuned and what caused it. I don't think if the reduction in symbols wasn't something they wanted to do, I don't think that Attuned would have happened. But I think conceptually, again, there was a lot of things that I was like, okay, I understand, I sort of pseudo agree, without having to sit it in the wild, so to speak, of it's trying to give cards more of a symbol identity. It's a way of, being able to play, have a set that is only 6 symbols and have it be workable. So there was a lot of reasons for sort of, I guess, again, that cautious optimism. Okay, this might work. The sort of issues, again, they've been sort of compounding, is that it homogenizes decks, right, in multiple ways, and I think it's homogenization is death, right? It just leads to too many things being the same thing. So because there was only very few symbols, especially the latter part of last year, where you just got 2 AOT sets, and they were just those 6 symbols, it meant that all the other symbols are basically dead in the water, right? Because they just didn't have the card pool. They didn't have like those power outliers from AOT, combined with they obviously didn't have any attuned stuff. So, why would you play other symbols when you can just play all the greatest hits of these ones, right? And maybe, obviously some of them were still around and you just play the best attuned stuff. But it just means deck building is like playing just the best card. It's almost a case of what symbols do I play, and then find the character that lets me play all these busted cards within these symbols, rather than this is a character I like, I'm going to build around this idea, this concept, and then think about the symbol from there. And it's kind of almost swapped that that deck building premise.
Well, I think the deck building premise has always been there. Of I've found this really cool combo, this really cool interaction. What character suits it best? But
Sure.
rather than being like a 50-50, I think you're right. It's more now people are looking at Falling Titans and going, okay, how can I combo this off? Cool. I just need any character with life to do this.
Yeah, and that was always a thing, right? It was maybe sometimes you'd have this like, okay, what is the best character where I can play this shell of an idea in? But I mean, I would say the vast majority of the time you were building around a character rather than anything else. Like you're like, oh, this character does something cool I like, or what have you, and then sort of go from there. Whereas it's just you just play the greatest hits in every deck, and so it leads to a lot more homogenization. Like if you look at top, again, obviously I've not done the research, obviously.
This is just your opinions.
Yeah, but I would imagine if you look at sort of regional results, like the top cuts of regionals from before Attuned and past Attuned, I would take a strong guess that there is a lot more homogenization in terms of characters and symbols, because of you just play the greatest hits, right? Sure, there's sometimes there are outliers where you have like the Ojiro tournaments, things like that, right? But again, you can just play the best cards every single time. There's no cost. You don't really have to think too much sometimes. You just like, I'm on this symbol, I'll just, jam 4x of this.
Yeah.
I think, and, like I'm playing a character of Chaos, I can just play the tower in advance. There's no cost to doing so, right? Or what have you. I don't, and this, again, you just play whatever. The symbol identity, I think, because that was again part of the reason for Attuned. I think there is some of that, but I think we all, I don't think it's necessarily the be all and end all of having that really strong symbol identity. There was always some of that, and I quite liked the bleed between cards where they felt like the several symbols. Like, I think the AOT and subsequently Turtle's approach to Attuned is wrong and leads to these homogenized deck building where you just play the greatest hits, and they're not as fun, they're not as interesting, you're not having to problem solve when you're deck building. But when you look at, say, the AOT, the Critical Role approach, while I still think you just get rid of Attuned, if you're going to do it, that's the way to do it, where you have your kind of cogs, your common, uncommon foundations and attacks and stuff with, the Attuned symbols. So you've got those kind of, your stapley bits, or, those bits to make up, because again, they're not highly powered. so they're going to be more specific, and you can plug and play those. But like, if you want to play a character that can play sweeping daggers, you've got to mean it, right? You can't just, my character has the air symbol, it just gets for sweeping dagger. I have to play a character main symbol with one of those three. Like, you have to mean it for those power level like outliers, like the higher rarity stuff. That is a much better approach. And similarly, I think with the going back to the three symbol characters, again, much more variety within those. There's much more you can do.
We'll get back. We will get to two symbol characters eventually as well.
But with the team, because of where they've backed themselves into this corner, right? We've had 3 sets of just those 6 symbols. So because they're fully attuned, it's just skewed deck building so much that it's not been fun, right? If you have enjoyed, if like Void or Good or what have you, or All was one of your favorite symbols, like, you just haven't had anything to get your teeth into for the past like year. So, and quite often, similarly, while people get very attached to a character, sometimes get people very attached to a symbol identity, don't they, Brett, with Chaos?
Well, no, Chaos, I kind of stayed into the meme, but you have got like Aaron, who is a avid evil player.
Exactly.
You've got people like Reese and Connor who claim the Earth symbol, and
and I've always loved the Void symbol, right? And obviously, I've not had anything with AOT. Obviously, there's with the other sets as well. But I think it backs yourself into these corners where you're having to have all this set with this symbol, and I think it just leads to these skewed card pools and ways you're deck building. And there's then very little overlap between those sets, right? In terms of, if you look at, because of the way they've done Attuned, there's not so much overlap, say, between AOT and Critical Role, or between AOT and Turtles. And because there is a lot of high power stuff in AOT at those top levels, it means it drowns out stuff where you've got those lower powered sets of Critical Role and Turtles, because they don't have access to those cards, because they don't have those symbols. So they are naturally at a disadvantage. Whereas before, where every set is mixed and matching, there's the much more bleed within those, and therefore much more room to look at someone, say, like an Allura or an Essek or something, and say, actually, I've got these 3 symbols, and because they were in Critical Role, I've got some things to draw on from there and actually think about what I'm doing with this stuff. Whereas there just isn't that. There isn't enough. There isn't so much bleed between those sets, and it's almost like you're forcing Spotlight with a few extra cards that you can just sort of fit in. So it just Attuned, if it was like all 12 symbols in a set with Attuned at lower rarity and high rarity 1, I think that's how you do it. But I think the reduction of symbols per set, plus Attuned being on everything, and therefore there's no cost to deck building, everything just goes in everywhere, has just left this homogenization, and just things aren't as fun or interesting. And if things aren't fun or interesting, people stop giving a shit. And that's sort of what's happened locally, right? The decks that, because of the way the design has gone, decks just aren't, the idea of building stuff isn't as fun, there isn't as much to get your teeth into. There isn't as much interesting niches and strategies to find. All these, you fit these moving parts together. It's like, well, I guess if I'm playing AOT, I do some sort of backup nonsense or what have you. I'm playing one of these symbols, or maybe I'll play this AOT character, but because they don't have access to half that stuff, they're just not as good, and there isn't as much leeway. There isn't that bleed to find those puzzle pieces and put together in interesting ways. So it means that people just stop giving a shit, because they don't have that as much fun in deck building. And for me, it's just, again, from that perspective, it's just been a failure, because it's just homogenization and boredom of death, right? Just everything being the same isn't fun. And then you also get the problem of fucking Deku 5, right? And that's gonna...
Well, not just Deku 5, you've got Fern Calloway and Keyleth of the Airshari, who've got 4 symbols themselves.
Well, Keyleth isn't necessarily so much a problem because half of them aren't in AOT, right? And also isn't quite as strong a power level. But yeah, you do have those issues where you've got those like 4 or 5 symbol characters, and when they will hit critical mass of I've got so many attuned cards that I'm busted. It just so happens Deku has A, 5 of them, and B, he's pretty cracked on face anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it makes no sense. There's a lot to unpack there. So before we bring
Rant
up the point
over.
there, Cam, how have you found teaching and covering Attuned, and how has it affected your locals and yourself in terms of deck building?
I will say, of all the changes AOT made, this was the one I was most excited for. Before I realized the entire set was going to be attuned. Kind of like what Richard was saying, the influx of everything being attuned, and like he said, that could be because they're cutting symbols. And I think they were also using it to spread symbol identity for the most part. I don't like that. It is hard with people coming in on turtles, explaining, like whenever I say, yeah, you just choose your main symbol, and they're like, what do you mean a main symbol? Because they see their two symbol character in turtles, everything's attuned. They're like, I can just play fire and water. I'm like, well, yes and no, because if you pick up older cards and the symbols are circles, and then they have to go back and then learn how that affects deck building, which is why I thought they were going to use attuned to kind of shore up symbol identity, like back in the MHA days, and I think they stopped doing it with MHA. But you had character kits. Every character had 9 cards that had all 3 of their symbols, and then you usually had about maybe 15 cards outside of the set, like at the end of the set, the back page as we called it. That was just random stuff with usually a random spattering of symbols to shore up those symbols. I thought if you kept everything to base symbol, for even if it was just like not even character kits, but like, oh, here's just a fire, water, earth card, something like that, and then shored up like your commons and uncommons with attuned, that kind of helped develop symbol identity and also just shore up stuff that was in the set already as like an assistant, so that not everything's attuned, so then I can show in the same set, this is how you build a deck, instead of, well, all of these cards are attuned, so that's fine, but if you go to older sets, and then that kind of becomes a turnoff when your sets aren't consistent in their design, and it really makes people struggle. Okay, I've got this card, because I came up with this with Guile from UVS Games. We were talking about how to build a deck with kamikaze robots and extended back roundhouse. And I told him, oh, you could play either Caleb or Essek. Totally forgetting that Essek didn't share the same symbol on extended back roundhouse as he does with Spellstorm. Because that was the idea I gave him, which he loved. But I totally forgot that Spellstorm and back roundhouse don't share the same symbol with Essek. Because I'm so entrenched in Attuned now that it just didn't even cross my mind.
I mean,
So
we
I
know
think
from a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about character globes, I just completely forgot
Oh, yeah,
Mimic
Mimic.
didn't have. Yeah, I was like, oh, this is great for Mimic. Yeah, Mimic has no symbols. It's like I forgot that symbols were a thing for a second.
Yeah, and I think that also would help with the homogenization, because you would still have clear lines of what the characters want to do, and they would have like support in that set. I'm not saying every character needs 9 cards again, especially if we're going to have bigger sets with more characters, but be like, hey, here's a couple of cards designated to this character for what this character's game plan is, and then you can shore it up with attuned cards to be like, oh, this can just help because I'm a fire character, I need a little extra milling help, so here's like 2 fire cards that are attuned that do mill stuff, and that can help kind of advance your deck. It can boost your deck, because one thing I hated pre-attuned was I had to pick one symbol on my character, at least if we're not going retro where you can off symbol, and we're not going to talk about that. But having access to all of my character's symbols now feels amazing. I love it. I love trying to figure out how to chop down my 95 card deck because I just put everything I could play in this character that I wanted to, and now I have to actually have to make some tough decisions. But when you have like such a limited pool of, oh, these are just all the good fire cards now.
Yeah.
So just play a fire character with all the good fire cards instead of like, oh, how can I mix and match and build something completely different and kind of expand on this one character and its own identities and help it perform what it wants to do. It feels much more restrictive when the entire set is attuned because you can have too much of a good thing.
Yeah. So like in that example, sure, you can build this character and you get access to all three of the symbols. But what happens is you end up with effectively one build of the character, right? Which is just the best 65, 70 cards, whatever, amongst their three symbols, and that's it. It's like there isn't like, three different builds because you're having to make hard choices about, okay, but I want to play this symbol for this card, but I want to play this symbol for this card. Okay, so what's more important? Where do I need to make those decisions? Where do I need to make those cuts? And like restriction breeds creativity, right? So you've got to think around those problems, and it makes a deck building much more interesting and much more, a puzzle to think around. But it means that things are a bit more of a level playing field. Like, you don't just have everything just being utterly bonkers all the time because you can just play everything. It's like, actually, I've got to make sacrifices. I've got to think about the symbol I'm playing because I don't just get to do everything I want all the time. I've got to, do I play this on Void, or do I play it on Evil, or do I play it on Death? Like, because there's real decisions, real costs to doing anything. Whereas now you're just like, well, it doesn't matter. I just slap all the good shit in and I'm done.
But Attuned does open up more interactions as well. Like we've got the new team and
it doesn't, right? Yeah. You just play all the best cards, right?
But you also get interactions you wouldn't get with main symbols, like the Exterminate Mutants, Falling Titans loop. Under the old system, that wouldn't exist, but now we have this interaction which may or may not be overpowered, but only exists thanks to Attuned. I think
you say that, but not necessarily. Like, that because obviously those cards only have that one symbol, right? But they might have shared evil, right? They might have shared the evil symbol and not the void symbol, for example. And you've got a character that has evil and void, right? So
which weren't in AOT.
What's that?
Which weren't in AOT, so they wouldn't have been able to share symbols.
The specifics are irrelevant, right? What I'm saying is, let's say you've got this combo that exists on evil but not on void, and you've got a character that has the evil and void symbol, and you're like, well, if I play it on evil I can do this thing, but actually if I play it on void I don't get to. Maybe I get to do something else. So you have to make the decision, and maybe if you take evil, so you can have this combo, you don't get access to these other cards you wanted to, but you can only access to how to play void. So you've actually got to make some decisions, and you've got to then decide which is more important. So again, you've got to be creative with your choices, and it's like, well, okay, because I want to play this combo, I've actually got to play this symbol, which means I can access this, which means I have to think about some other stuff I need to do. So again, it's more of a challenge rather than herpa derpa, chuck all the good shit in and I'm done. And
I agree.
Well, it's more nuanced than that, but mostly to an extent, that's sort of what it is.
Yeah, and I can agree because there is a lot of people who watch know I'm a Jamie gamer. The only symbol I have not played Jamie on is air, because I'm not a fan of the air symbol. The new deck I'm building for is air, simply because it's the only symbol he shares with Hunter's Ally, and I want to do that hunting party Jamie. So I now have to think about an air build that I've never thought about before, because this higher rarity, higher power card is symbol locked.
Because
so I think if we have key pieces, key pieces like that, like ultra rares and even some rares being multi-symbol, not attuned. I actually don't mind secrets being attuned, like the backups from TMNT. I don't mind that, because I think having something like that can fit multiple decks, multiple characters, having this little party with you, it's kind of like just putting infinity on them. It's just restricting them more than infinity.
But at the same time, the critical role secret rares, which weren't attuned, also feel really good, because it's kind of capturing the essence of the moment of the D&D attack.
Yeah.
And going, you need to be playing this symbol. It's kind of
I'm just saying attuned should have been in moderation.
Yes.
We shouldn't have fully attuned sets.
Let's go back to the best set of the year, Critical Role, which was attuned hybrid with main symbol. And
and it felt much more balanced.
Yeah, and like you said, like if you wanted to, You want to play Hunter's Ally Jamie? Well, you got to mean it, right? You've got to play air. You don't just get to be like,
Absolutely.
well, I'll
I
just
have to
take
learn
8
how
cards
to
out of my
play an
existing
air
deck
symbol.
and slap Hunter's Ally in, and I'm done, right? I'm actually well, have I got to mean it now?
It was very thematic, as you were saying, to the sets, but having the lower rarities be attuned made sense for Critical Role. When you've got spells like Crotch Lightning, which is just Scanlan's Lightning Bolt, any mage can use a lightning spell. So having it be Chaos attuned makes sense to the set, makes sense to the universe, and makes sense to the IP in general. But if you get a Violent Animus Shot, a Sweeping Daggers, Grog's Rage, those are all linked to the flair and style of a character. So having these, not kits, but more character specialized,
Core thematic cards.
a character identity card made sense. If you wanted to play Yasha using rage counters, you were locked into Grog's symbols because you needed Grog's rage, you needed Grog's cards to come in there, so you had to follow this theme. You had to have it go really thematic, and that's something I absolutely loved. Having Sweeping Daggers, Goblin Aerial Bolt be locked to their character symbols, going, if you want to team up with this character, use their attacks, you need to be on their symbols.
Yeah, you got to mean it. If you're doing it, you got to mean it.
But then that also
Absolutely.
ties into what Rich was bringing up. Attuned and the lack of symbols in each set messes with symbol identity. It's a video I put up, and it's what it had the most engagement out there. Symbols have their overarching identity. Water is a defensive card pool stuffing. Then you've got good, which is a build fast defensive symbol. But in AOT, you don't have either of those symbols. So where's your defensive, fast building, card pool stuffing kind of mechanics? And card pool stuffing doesn't really exist in AOT. Fine, but you still need a defensive symbol. And that was kind of covered by life. You didn't have all, but you had characters that cared about mill, so you had to create a brand new mill system. Because in MHA, as people point out to me from my video, all was the mill symbol with Night Eye. And then we go back to AOT and we go, oh, AOT has all. AOT has characters that care about mill. Awesome. Give Leonardo care about mill. Give Leonardo all. Should we give him fire so he has access to all the AOT mill stuff and would actually make him more of a competitive viable choice? Nah, he doesn't need fire. He doesn't need access to 3 sets worth of mill cards. He's got Undaunted Rage for 6 months and whatever girl power through him.
Yeah, I would say that fire has always had a lot of its own self mill. All was more milling your rival. So to have Leonardo have all instead of fire, it did feel weird. But then again, I don't know what you would give Raph, because now you have this. I mean, you could give him all and have all be the new playing things from removed from game, and that would give all more of an identity. But self mill has almost always been like a fire exclusive kind of thing. And yeah, that did feel weird that now that we're changing that up, and again, that comes from cutting symbols. So other symbols are having to cover for each other's identities, unless that identity is simply not in the set, because all also had a lot of draw in the old days. There's a lot of draw on all. So if you have no all, do you just have no cards that draw cards?
Yeah,
I mean,
I think all is very much like feels very much like doing lots of spinning wheels without actually putting numbers on anything.
Yeah, it was a utility symbol.
Back in the MHA era, we all know there was a few dozen 1-cost flip. I'll draw a card on every single symbol. Attunement was a great way to handle that because you go, cool.
Yeah,
we have one symbol that draws cards. If your character has it, you have access to card draw. We don't need to print an entire set with every symbol having the same kind of things. But what you just said there, having all be the new, like, remove from play symbol, every set seems to be changing what symbol's secondary identities are. They still have this underlining main identity, which is on some of the cards. But at AOT, you had air being this clear from card pool and cut progressive symbol, and then it changed to the inventor symbol in Critical Role, and now we've got to TMNT, and it doesn't have the air symbol. It does have the air symbol, but we've got Void being the inventor symbol, which is again. So you've got this response on No Mercy Percy, which Donatello and Bishop will never get to use, And it seems like identity is becoming more about where the IP needs it rather than where the game consistency would like it. And I think keeping this game consistent would be great for the mental load of the players that then have to take into account all these other sets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely makes approaching the greater game as a whole, more daunting when you're trying to teach people symbol identity with only a handful of symbols, and then you go into older sets and it's like, well, we're going into Attack on Titan, so they didn't have the Earth damage reduction, so that goes kind of towards life, and you have to completely rethink how you're playing the game. When I heard they were cutting symbols, I didn't like that, but I'm also someone who doesn't like fighting with one hand tied behind my back. That's why I love retro. Just give me all the things and let me play in my giant sandbox. But I understand how daunting that can be to like newer players, and I know you want to be very like welcoming and accepting of newer players. You want easy onboarding, but I think in some of the greater design as a whole of sets, if you focus too much on newer players, especially with the restrictions of attuned and cutting out symbols, you are kind of putting yourself in a box where, okay, how do we make this easy for newer players, but now we have to change things, and that means the people who started with this set now have to change their thinking after they just got used to it to something else, and that could be very off-putting as well.
Yeah, it's what I mean. We said earlier that we got a lot of articles around this time about the changes AOT was bringing in, and in one of those articles, Bill did say they were trying to balance making the game easier for new players, but keeping the game interesting for the current player base. And it's hard. Yeah, it's hard to say that they've actually done that. We lost a lot of good players over the course of this year, especially in the UK, where we lost a lot of our, I'm going to say, named players, the players that international outside the UK would more recognize, which was kind of like a big shock. So it's hard to say they kept the interest of returning of the current player base when a lot of the people I'd go to for deck building advice or like to talk about cards no longer play the game.
Yeah, like when you're just having to what death, chaos, life character am I playing for the next year? Like you just lose interest, right? It's like okay, all the best cards are on these symbols, so I guess we're just doing that for the next year.
Yeah.
If you're looking at things from a competitive standpoint, and even as the most sort of casual newer player, like it's a game. You want to win, right? Just losing all the time isn't fun. So like you're still trying to win with these decks. So that that even if you're not the most competitive, the most sweaty, you're still trying to win. And if it's like, okay, well, I have to do this thing to win because they're the ones that have got 3 times the card pool as everyone else. Like it's just not as fun or interesting.
Yeah.
And the issue with what they did with AOT, especially because they had 3 sets of it lined up, and especially 3 sets of it in a row, effectively, with the little break of
Critical
Role.
Yeah. Well, that had to do because it lined up with the 10-year anniversary.
Yeah.
Sure. Again, you can sort of conspiracy theory that as much as you want, I suppose. But like, it just means that because you have Critical Role 2. There was lots of like people talking about after you did 1 and before spoilers for Critical Role 2 had come out. It's like, oh, is Critical Role 2 going to have the other symbols then? And it's like, well, obviously it's not, because you have to be able to play your Critical Role 2 cards with your Critical Role 1 cards, or else the whole thing doesn't work at all. So it was always going to be the same symbols. In which case, again, you're just pigeonholing yourself in, and they just I think they made themselves a problem by doing it this way. Is that okay? Well, we've designed it now, we've done it, so we've kind of got to see it through, but it's problematic in that, because again you run into all these problems of like this homogenization of things being less interesting. So it was like a rod they made for their own back by approaching things this way. And again, I don't fault them for taking the risk.
So
But it's almost begs the question. I do wonder if like maybe there was the intention of just going back to back to back, and actually they realised they had this problem, so they had to kind of rush AOT critical rollout.
no,
Because because the other thing, when you're looking at these design decisions, it's been a very scattershot approach, right? You had AOT, which is all this stuff, AOT 2, which was sort of continuing the trend, Critical Role, which sort of pared some of it back, added some of it back in, like added, and other symbols. AOT 3 comes along and sends it back to where it was, and then all of a sudden, then you've got Turtle, which is now back to again where it was, and you've also got Challenger decks, which again also necessarily follow those same principles. So it's been a very scattershot approach from there. So again, just making things harder to work out.
I mean, I think it's actually a bit more consistent to how UVS have been over the last couple of years, because we had Jetburn, Yu Hakusho, Girl Power, and then we had AOT 2, Critical Role, AOT 3. So it's kind of fitting with the theme. But just to quickly like hop back to talk about the Critical Role Challenger and then the Critical Role set. They kept the same symbols and then added a few more on top of that. My question to you, and I may be shooting myself in the foot for a future video I've got planned to actually come out. How many symbols, if we get, in air quotes, a Godzilla set, should that set have them?
They need to go back to all 12. They just either they need to say and bite the fucking bullet and say 12 symbols are too many. 3, 2, 4, however many symbols, we're not doing them anymore. Like, we're going to cut off the least popular ones or the ones we think are most tricky to design for. We're just not doing them. We're now a 9-symbol game forevermore. Either you do that or you just print all the 12 symbols in every single set, because I think where you've got the gaps between the boost, between the releases, and therefore every single time you got released, the meta and deck building challenge gets skewed in one end and then back the other way and then back the other way, I think just is shit.
Did you
and I think everyone locally has felt the same in terms of feeling for the past, however long, that it's just like, well, I guess I'll play Chaos or Death.
So did you actually, was that you just wanted to say all 12 symbols should come back, or did you actually know that the Godzilla Challenger characters had all 12 symbols?
No, I wasn't basing this on any data. That was purely vibe.
Cameron quickly fact-checking me here.
I'm not saying I'm fact-checking you, but I might be fact-checking you.
Yeah, so the 12 symbols, it's literally a future video I've got coming out in the next, either this week or next week. The Godzilla Challenger set has all 12 symbols, and unless they're going to cut some, the Godzilla Challenger set you need to have all 12. It's kind of thing of, they like to be consistent within all the IPs. When we look at the Dark Hero Challenger deck, it has no blitzes. It still doesn't have enhancers on any of the attacks.
Yeah.
But it has no blitzes. Every single one of those attacks is a response. It also has no attuned, which is quite weird for the time it came out.
I mean, that's easily explainable. It's just because of things are not designed in a specific order, right? And almost certainly the Dark Hero stuff was designed and then possibly even sent to printers before they'd finalized all the attuned and blitz stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, and this is part of it, and I think that's why you seeing the difference between AOT and Critical Role and Back to the Turtles is that these weren't necessarily designed in this order, and I'd be very surprised if they were. I would be surprised, if I were to guess, I would say that all 3 critical AOT sets are probably mostly designed at the same time. They then design Turtles, and then they design Critical Role. And they
no, I actually have an answer for this, because I sat down with Hitch last week, depending on how you see Sundays. That video is pending approval, because we cover some topics. I'm going to spot here. AOT was designed back to back to back. TMNT was acquired whilst Critical Role was being designed, because they used the art for Leonardo's Katana, the pre-release promo, to show Paramount what they could do with the TMNT license. And the amazing Lachar helped us get that. So again, big shout out to Lachar. I'll shout out where I can. So yeah, using like, it's kind of, as I put it in my interview Hitch, it's kind of like a low-key situation where we're seeing everything playing out as this like linear line. UVS are designing and creating these cards in this TVA kind of, we're going to jump in at different random points of the timeline and design these cards. And it must be,
what I said.
Yeah, it must be this really crazy thing to do. But yeah, well, I was just like saying, I know AOT was designed back to back to back. I know Critical Role and TMNT were kind of the same thing. But it's like you're saying, it's a process of, it's all jumbled up how we see it. It's all jumbled up when it comes out to us, and design and creative are very far ahead of us. It's a long time to get these changes.
And like, and also like, we don't. I mean, I don't know whether it is a public knowledge thing that I'm just not aware of in terms of how their like design teams are structured, right? In terms of like, I don't know how many people are on their cast design teams. Like, not talking like art and design. I'm talking about people who worry about the text on the cards.
Yeah, like the Bill, Jeremy Ray, Team Free.
Whether they're working as a team on each and every set always, or whether there was 3 people working on Critical Role while 4 people working on Attack on Titan or Turtles, whatever, and they whether they were communicating or not. I don't know how that structure works, but they are feeling like very disparate designs.
Well, they can keep ducking me, but I will eventually get an interview and I will get these answers.
Well, maybe. So yeah, I think. What were we talking? I can't even remember what we were talking about. It was Attuned, right? And
if Godzilla got a set, should we have all symbols come back? I actually have a good answer for that.
That was the question, but we're kind of talking about symbol identity at this point. But
yeah, I have a good question. I have a good answer for it.
Yeah, go for it, Cam. Tell me how you'd handle the 12 symbols of the Challenger Godzilla.
Well, for one, you're right. All 12 symbols do show up on those characters. So
believe it or not, I fact check my videos before I publish them.
You know what? You do so much, it's often that you might make a mistake. You never know. But I think put all 12 symbols in, because I think one of the reasons they said that they were taking symbols out, aside from, making it feel like it fits the world more, which, sure, was that it was hard to find certain characters that matched, like the symbols matched those characters' identity, which also fair. But that's why I think you can do the mixed bag of, you have your character with their 3 symbols or however many symbols the character is going to have their core support cards, like their 5 or 6 cards, and then have attuned cards that focus on symbol identity that can shore up that character's build. So it's like, oh, this is a really good Earth character who has fire and maybe like death. So it's like, oh, I can use some fire mill stuff and some death casino stuff to make this Earth character go a little bit harder, because Earth provides the backbone of my defense. I think if you do that split of character, core support with some attuned symbol identity stuff, you can actually have all 12 symbols back each set and still provide each symbol the support it needs to thrive.
So you think
it's a Critical Role thing, basically?
Yeah, you're saying that Godzilla's going to be an expansion on what Critical Role's already doing.
Yeah, I think Critical Role was a great way to show that you can do this, and you can lead more into this. Instead of like 9 with Critical Role, maybe the next one's going to be 10 or 11, until you finally have 12, and then you have some attuned stuff that works for symbol identity, and then Infinity is stuff that every character should have access to. Yeah. Maybe Infinity has the 1 difficulty flip draw card, and not every symbol gets that, but you can have 4 copies of this Infinity card, so everyone has access to it.
No, I mean, Infinity is its own problem.
Infinity it's not a problem. Infinity's not a problem. Infinity is the solution.
Infinity's a problem when they print too good stuff on Infinity, right?
But again, that's because they're limiting themselves with the symbols that they have access to. So in that point, Infinity was working overtime.
Yeah.
So instead of having a whole bunch of cards that are each symbol flip one to draw one, you just have that as the Infinity card.
Yeah, so that's perfect. So, for example, what is it? I don't remember the name of the card, but it's an Attack on Titan card, which is the 2-diff first enhanced flip draw card, right?
Yeah.
It's not very good, but sometimes it's the best you got, so you just run it. And that's fine, because that's like the power level that an Infinity card should be, not filled with doubt, moment, and normalcy, which are egregious.
Yeah, but if you put them onto a symbol, you're locking that. You're making that. It seemed like when David Toombs was talking about this and was saying vertical maneuvering equipment should have been an air attuned card. It's like no, it shouldn't.
It should have been attuned. It should be an air symbol card. So you've got to mean it.
No,
if you want to play, if you've got to play it, if you want to play like whatever this card is, you got to pick that symbol.
Infinity's new identity should be the baseline power level that every symbol gets. So moment of normalcy.
No, it should be worse. No. Infinity cards should be worse than a symbol based card.
But you were just complaining that if you wanted to play on good, you didn't get any cards. Well, you did. You got vertical maneuvering equipment. You got a moment of normalcy. You got filled with doubt. If I want to play a good character, but I'm going to struggle against, say, Attack on Titan or against these similar attacks, I can still play Filled with Doubt. I can still play Molten Normalcy. I still have access to this baseline power.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that they're not baseline. They are too good to be considered baselines. They are cards that are effectively staples. Doesn't matter what symbol you're playing. Doesn't matter what deck you're playing. You should just be playing these cards because they're too good. You shouldn't not be playing these cards.
Isn't that the baseline? The cards that you should be playing? The cards that are going to help you?
No, because you shouldn't be starting a deck list with 4 cards, right? You shouldn't be saying, right, before I even chose my symbol, before I've even chosen my character, I've got these cards on the deck list, right? That's boring, that's shit. That's what I'm saying, is that it should be a case of, right, I've got this weakness, whether it is, like I say, that I don't draw enough cards, so maybe I've got to play some of these 2-diff flip draw a card, which is not a very good rate, but it does a job and it's fine, so I can play it. Or maybe I'm weak to a specific type of attack, so I've got to play Filled with Doubt, which is actually a 3-diff action that checks a 4, and I need to spend a momentum to do it. It's a powerful effect. I need access to it, but it's not great. But I've got access to it. You know, obviously they were just numbers.
So you're saying that Infinity cards should either be spam cards or filler cards that do a thing badly?
Yes, they should never do something that a symbol does on its own well, right? So, for example, like Filled with Doubt is like very much a sort of void card, right? It's effectively a cancer. It feels very voidy, right? So you should have access to, so Filled with Doubt could have been, say, a void attuned card or void symbol card, whatever the fuck you want to call it.
But it couldn't.
What?
Filled with Doubt couldn't have been a void card.
But no, because it's not in the set. But
exactly.
like again, you're worrying about specifics rather than concepts here. What I'm saying is,
I think you're getting hung up on the specifics as well, because we agree with you that they shouldn't be too powerful.
Card.
Yeah.
So
but the fact that they were in this attuned world made them more powerful. Yeah, they had to be more powerful to keep up with that. So we're in effect agreeing with you.
That's problematic. Like, you know, Filled with Doubt should not be as good as
but
it is.
That's the attuned issue. It's not a problem with Infinity symbol. That's where we're disagreeing.
Yeah, it's Infinity having to fill the gaps of the symbols that aren't there and providing support to symbols that aren't there. That's spilling over.
So if we go back to the full 12 symbol, Infinity could lower its power level.
That's why they've done it, to fill those gaps, fill those holes. But that's a problem, right? It's not a problem you fix with. And it's just a way of, it should be huge fucking alarm bells that they felt the need to do that, because again, you're in a situation where it's not like, okay, I've got these couple of gaps so I can fill them in with these Infinity cards. It's the Infinity cards are too powerful to not play no matter what fucking deck you're playing, and there is a fine line there, right? It's not the like moment of normalcy is just like a bad reset that, you know, okay, we don't get so many resets in the symbols, we need to play it. It's like one of the better resets in the game because it's like just repeatable, commit, reset something, right? So why would you never not play any of these cards unless it's a case of, okay, I'm playing a DR card, you know, it's one of those cards that it's like, okay, well, why wouldn't I just play one of these? And that feels boring and shit and homogenous. And that's my problem with it, is that it should be like if Moment of Normalcy was like a, say, a remove cost or a sacrifice cost, right? It's still solid. It's still a 2-diff. I reset something once and it's fine. And so that still fills the same problem. It still fills the same goal of I've got access to a reset on symbols that don't have it otherwise. But it's not a good reset. It's fine. It's serviceable. And that's what the Infinity cards should be. They can fill the gaps. That's not a problem. But they should be serviceable, not too good or so good that you just play them no matter what. They're not a case of filling the gap. They are what they are. You're just playing them because they're too good not to play. They're not gap fillers. They're just staples that you play on every single symbol, no matter what the heck it is you're doing. And that's where certainly in AOT 3 they cross that line of the Infinity symbol cards are too good, right? The 2-diff flip draw card is perfectly playable in some decks. Like sometimes you just need to run it. You don't really want to, but you do. Whereas Fill Without Moment Normalcy and to an extent the Searing Glacial Storm, whatever the hell it's called, are too good to be on the Infinity symbol and just have everyone access to, then they don't have to mean it. That's, I guess, sort of where my underlying beef with all of these things like the Attuned symbol stuff is that you no longer have to mean it when you deck build, right? You just jam shit and it doesn't matter. And so it just takes a lot of the interest of building decks, takes a lot of the fun of building decks, because you just jam all the good stuff and it doesn't matter. And that's just not interesting. And so, and having these really powerful Infinity cards just exacerbates that. So if you're forcing yourself into a point where I need to build these really good Infinity cards, or else my stuff doesn't work, well, then your stuff just doesn't work, right? It's not that these are fixed. It just fundamentally, you're fucked because, well, you're not, plugging.
But then you are making some symbols unplayable in standard. As we've said, we've got the almost 1,000 cards from AOT. 700 cards from AOT that are all on these 6 symbols, which means the other 6 symbols have nowhere near the card pool support. And after League of Villains, Undaunted Raid, and Jetburn rotate in February, they lose even more. And what you're saying is they shouldn't have access to what AOT is giving them, or they should, but it should be strictly worse.
Well, no, because you're not like you're putting them on an even playing field, because it's not like, okay, if I'm playing a death character compared to, let's say I'm playing a good character, right? I'm playing a death character, I have access to all the AOT shit. I'm playing a good character, I don't. So I need my Moment of Normalcy Filled with Doubts to pick up the goods deck, because it doesn't have access to this shit where the death one does. Well, that's not the case. It's not like there's filling a gap over here. It's like, well, they both start with that, so it doesn't actually fix anything. The death deck's still just better.
But isn't that the definition of a baseline? They both have access to it. It's the baseline that all symbols have.
Yeah, what I'm saying is the baseline is bad. Having that baseline of, okay...
He's saying the baseline's too high.
Yes, yeah. So what I'm saying is these cards are too good. As in, they shouldn't be the first 6 cards on your deck list, no matter what deck you're building. They should be things, okay, that I can plug some holes with, not the first 6 cards on your deck list.
But if you, like I said, people get attached to symbols. If they wanted to play an Earth deck or an Evil deck, and they're going, cool, I have nothing but holes, and now I have nothing but bad cards filling those holes. Whereas if you go to the Death and the Chaos and the Life, who are all eating ridiculously well, yeah, that might be the first 6 cards they put in the deck. But they might also not stay in there. Hyper-aggressive decks don't really care about moment or normalcy. And
sure, but it's not like these ones are picking this deck up, right? They're still, if you got this, and then the good deck has this stuff, or the death one has all this. It's like, the fact they've access this isn't really changing the fucking thing. And this is, I think these Infinity cards are not fixing the problem of symbol imbalance. These are not fixing the problem of every deck has just been basically death, chaos, life forever. or maybe some void. Now we've got like, because Rodan is still fucking bonkers. But like again, symbol spread and symbol use has been so crunched down because of this approach. And the Infinity cards aren't fixing it; they're just bullshit. Like they're not really helping the problem; they're just there. They're not bringing these other decks up to scratch because everyone has access to them. They're not really helping. They still don't have the card pool.
I mean, it's kind of the syndrome thing of if everyone's special, no one's special, and we've been going back and forth on this point quite a lot. I don't agree with that, but that's fine. We don't have to agree on everything. I think the Infinity Symbol's filling a gap that is much needed. Yeah, I do understand your point as well that gap shouldn't exist to begin with, and that
I think Infinity cards are fine. I just think they need to be toned down from where they were in AOT3.
Well, I mean,
I can understand that.
Yeah, it's understandable. We're approaching 2 hours, and so let's move along. Let's talk about one of the new things that we got that seems to have only gone up in stocks. However, I don't think it's gone up in Richard's stocks. Let's talk about backups. The lovely pink cards that are taking the community by storm. They're now our SRs in TMNT. They've got their own exclusive keyword in elusive. Cam has done or will be doing an amazing video on that. I think it's already up.
Already did.
Yeah, and backups from when we were shown them, where they were pseudo planeswalkers. In my opinion, they were damaging themselves to do abilities. They were only going to be on the board for a certain amount of time because their abilities kind of ticked them down. Went from that to kind of an issue.
Titans. Yeah. Backups, I think, as a concept, where I would fling Blitz and Attuned and reduce symbols all into the bin, I think backups I would be happy staying, right? I think backups actually are kind of cool. I think they add a little wrinkle to the game. I don't think they're actually too bad. I like the sort of where they were in Critical Role and Shocking Twist of Rents. I think the ones like early on in AOT1 were a bit underpowered and therefore just unplayable. I think Critical Role ones are like, yeah, you can see these slotting in. I think some of the sort of symbol-based ones in AOT3 were quite nice. I just think basically they've gone a bit too far with backups in terms of everything being backup focused, and it feels a bit too much pushed down your throats in that you sort of have to do it rather than being a choice, right? In Critical Role, sure, there was a couple of characters like Caduceus and stuff that were backup focused, and that's fine. But it feels like certainly AOT3, they were very pushed. Like it felt like every single character referenced backups, right? So I'm okay with them as a concept. Like I'm not a huge fan. Like I'm okay with them in terms of effectively like assets that are more interactable. Like you can interact in the combat step with backups. Like there is a back and forth there. I think that's fine. I just think they went too far in AOT3. I think in AOT1 and 2 they were sort of okay-ish. But I think they've pushed the sort of backup agenda too far. Rather than being an option, it felt a little bit like they were the only option, or they were too suffocating in terms of everything is now about just backups, rather than being a piece of the pie. It felt like they were just trying to be all of the pie. And so I think I'd happy keep backups. I'd just tone it down. Like don't feel like you had this cool idea, so I now need to just smash it. Just tone down the backups a little bit.
How about yourself, Cameron?
I agree. My only issue with backups is 9 Titans and Hanji. If 9 Titans was a 5-diff backup, I think I'd be fine with it. But when they become, because that's one of the issues is we don't have a lot of ways outside of attacking to deal with backups. So when you make backups unattackable with characters like Hanji, then they're uninteractable and it's not fun. It's kind of like how Blitz, if everything just automatically does something and you have no say in it, it's kind of rough. So if we had more ways to deal with them outside of just attacking them, because then if you're just attacking your rival's backups, the game's not really going anywhere.
Mhm.
And I can see that as a reason to use powerful backups, like the new elusive ones of these actually have effects that matter. So you're gonna want to deal with them. But if you also gave us a few more tools other than attacking to deal with them, like they don't all have to be like a nape strike where you're just deleting, or like a violent animus shot, but like like a widow gas web of fire, all backups lose 2 health. Something like that sprinkled in here and there, I think it would be better, so that way you don't have to push backups as 9 Titans and the SR backups is these are really powerful, so you want to use them, but then your rival's just going to attack them, so we're also going to give them these protections. At that point, just like people have been saying, make them characters.
So what about
if they're going to be that impactful?
Yeah. So what about the AOT 1 Titans? Because I like the AOT 1 backups more than the more recent ones, because they had to use their stamina for their abilities.
I do like that. I like how that concept felt, and backups like those not being able to be attacked with like Hanji. Sure, give us the little dinky, not great ones that use their stamina as a resource, and make those like unattackable, because they're going to be cutting themselves down anyway. So if you had more stuff like that, you wouldn't need elusive.
They were a bit underpowered, right? Those early ones.
Yeah, but if 9 Titans, say, had a stamina cost, you go, okay, you can only do this a certain amount of times.
Well, it does.
It does.
It does, but it's also just the fact that you, with Hanji, you can't interact with it at all, unless you've got Nape Strike or Violent Animus Shot.
I just know I've been up against a lot of backup decks where the backups just keep doing stuff and they just don't die, and it just keeps becoming an ever-growing problem because they've lost unique and they've lost the stamina cost abilities, and they just become this essentially swarm of backups that fill out my opponent's board and go, cool, I don't even have enough attacks in my deck to deal with this.
Yeah.
Actually, I think, as I just scroll through here, I think the AOT 3 backups and the new ones and the critical role ones are the only ones that don't cost stamina. Because like the Little Mister cost stamina, and all the AOT 2 and AOT 1 backups all cost stamina, except for Universus Attack Titan, but that's a sacrifice. So it's only the newer ones, like starting with Critical Role, where they saw maybe people weren't using backups enough. That's when they started with Critical Role not costing stamina for anything.
Yeah.
So maybe that's an issue. We have to go back to, except for like the 9 Titans.
Because with like Rayflay and Genghis Frog, it's a case of if they were costing stamina for their abilities, they can only do a certain amount of times before they die.
Yeah, and that's why you have you want to attack them, and those ones I can see having elusive to where they're at least going to stick around a little bit.
Yeah,
but I don't think that should be what we want backups to be. I think that should be an exception rather than the rule.
Yeah, they should be a cool wrinkle and a cool other thing you're dealing with in the game. I think ideally there needs to be some more main deckable answers, right?
Yeah.
So things like Nape Strike, like you can't main deck the card.
No.
Really?
Unless you're on the death symbol and you just need low blocks, but yeah.
Yeah, but like Animus Shot, right, is totally fine if you're not going against backups. And that's why, like, when I was doing the Bake Off, I said I feel like, the meta is either you're playing 9 times or you're playing Animus Shot, so you're doing one of the two.
So what if they errated, even going into retro kind of things, and said any board wipe that said the current card type, so like Godzilla does, I think is Godzilla just foundations or is it assets as well?
It's foundations and assets. That's why I built a shift backup Godzilla, so you could keep doing.
So if you added backups to Godzilla, if you added backups to Decay Awakening, if you added backups to Self Destruct, you then get a lot more options and go, we've got more card types since these were printed. We're going to include this in the board wipe aspect and go, we're going to even out the playing field.
Yeah, I would say instead of just say all non-character cards in all stages. Stuff like that. You don't have to include technically as a like add the card type, but just word cards like that to say all non-character
Like
cards.
the new Rhino that says for each card type in your stage, just go remove, destroy all non-character cards in both
You
player
just need
stages.
more cards that do something and aren't completely embarrassing when the opponent isn't playing a backup, right? So like Wintergrasp Grove of Fire is like fine, but probably not quite as good enough. But like Animus Shot is obviously, you know, it's a push card, but it's like not embarrassing. It's fine when you're not playing its backups, but it's obviously even better when they are. And so having more options like that, where you've got cards that are main deckable and also then aren't embarrassing if you aren't playing against backups, I think is the way forward. But yeah, I think backups, I think mostly I would give them a pass on. I don't know whether I would say fully a success. But I think they're a reasonable addition to the game. I just think they've been pushed a bit too much.
I mean, it was a big push because they were new, and they have possibly been the best received, like universally received one of the big changes. I don't think,
at least once they started doing something, because
yeah,
people hated them in set 1 because you only had the 2 and then the shift attacks.
Yeah.
And then shift attacks started shifting into foundations, so...
And then you got things like the Caduceus Party Bomb, and you've now got the Looping Fallen Titans, and they've become a lot more...
I will say I started that with Elder to Grow before Caduceus did.
I mean, it was around for quite a while. I know I got it done against me a couple of times. Backups just have become more ingrained in the deck. Right, I think the last thing I wanted to really talk about is something we covered briefly at the beginning, and that's the Clash decks slash starter decks. They've kind of learned from the AOT ones. The health totals have increased, but I think they have just improved since Clash decks. I mean, the Critical Role star deck has the assets in there, the list and the hunt and the quest board. The new TMNT one has Splinter as a backup, and I know when we got the article in the Gamer about, I think it was the Gamer, when we got the article from Scott from IGN about the game, they were talking about the fact that the star decks don't cover enough of the cards in there. We don't see all the card types. I get why some card types like actions aren't in there.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine.
Yeah, actions are absolutely fine, but the star deck should give you a good sense of what all the cards in the game do, outside of actions, which are very awkward to explain to a new player. That's my opinion.
I think you could leave assets and actions out. It doesn't really matter. I think for a totally started product, I think you can include backups because they're sort of more interactable. I think that's fine. I think they've certainly come a long way. I think in Clash decks, they absolutely should be including 2 characters. I don't know why they're not doing this already. Here's my basic bitch character, and I'm going to play all the exact same cards with this slightly complex character, and I understand the game. So like the AOT ones, I say they're the worst product they've ever designed and ever released. If they had included like the Eren one, right? If they'd have included even just like the base set Eren in that. So here's I'm learning the game, and then here's I've learned the game, I've played a few things, and now I'm going to play this other character. It may not have worked because of the cards or whatever, but like just something on those lines of here's an upgraded character. So I've learned the game with this crappy one, this terrible, unplayable character, but it's fine if I'm just learning the mechanics of the game. I'm not really trying to win. Once I've learned it, I can upgrade to a character that has actual stats, actual text, and I can do something with. It just improves that product so much. Like a lot of the problem with that product was that character just being so bad. And I don't think they necessarily quite learned the lessons. Like the Critical Role ones were a bit better in terms of the product, but again, those characters were still underpowered. Again, just put in like the very beginner, and here's a real character to play with this Clash deck, and all of a sudden you've got such a better product.
I agree, especially if you're putting the same character, but the character that's in the core set. So you have your training wheels and then your real character, and then design the starter deck around the one that's like the core set one, and then just dumb it down a little bit for the training wheels one, the starter one,
Yeah.
and you're almost golden, I would say.
Yeah,
So-
you've got progression within one product, right?
Yeah, so like how the Percy and Bo ones would work with their counterparts, and even the Team and T1 would quite easily work with their counterparts. How do you feel about the exclusive cards? Because the Team and T1 has 6 exclusive cards, including the character, whereas for AOT and Critical Role, it was just the characters that were exclusive. And apart from Cam winning locals, they weren't the best characters.
So the TMNT one has cards that aren't in the main set.
Yeah, it has Splinter.
5 exclusive cards.
Yeah, 2 attacks, 2 foundations, and the backup Splinter.
I think that's fine. I mean, I think ideally you don't want them to be staples, right?
Right. And
So again,
none
you
of
don't
them
want-
are really.
Yeah.
Splinter, I could definitely
Splinter
see
is
some
only
time.
played in 4 characters.
Because again, you don't want. It's a tough balance, right? As in, you don't want existing players just buying all of them because they want those cards, and therefore new players can't get them. But you also don't want them only appealing to newer players, so shops aren't left with like a shit ton of stock of the stuff they can never ship.
Well, I mean, the
Yeah,
Team and T ones are going to appeal to already existing players anyway, because they're all 1987 alt arts of every other card in the deck, in the set. So
Yeah, but not
I
everyone
will
necessarily
say I am
cares
only
about that,
playing
right?
those alt arts if I can.
Yeah, not everyone necessarily cares about it. Some people will, some people won't. Whereas, like, everyone wanted, like, copies of Mirror and Overhaul because they were just bonkers, right?
Mm.
So
Yeah, or
you know,
the Toga and Ochako decks,
Yeah.
which were very powerful.
yes,
I
Yeah,
think striking that weaker balance with maybe some exclusivity just to, so that your people
Yeah.
who are spending money on the game already are still going to spend money on the game, but they won't just buy out a whole bunch
yeah,
and
so
just
they
make
don't-
the exclusive cards you only need like 2 of, or
Yeah,
make them
and-
commons where you are going to get 4 of in the deck anyway.
yeah, unless I particularly read one of those cards, I'm like, oh, I really want copies of that. I'm not that fussed, so I'm not necessarily going to buy any copies of it. Whereas, like,
Exactly.
obviously I wanted the Chaco and Overhaul ones and blah, blah, blah. So it's like, you've straddled that line of they're still desirable to existing players, but not necessarily everyone just needs to have them. So they can skip them, and therefore there are some for newer players, but you do have those 2 streams of, market for selling that product for the retailer.
that makes a lot of sense. We'll start to wrap up because it's past 11 and I've got a massive week of annoying stuff ahead of me. So let's wrap it up with just a very simple question of what from AOT should, in your opinion, very clear opinion, should UVS have learned, and what changes should they make from that?
I'll let Richard go first.
They need to sometimes take that step back of, okay, we can do this. Should we do this? I think they might be getting a little too lost in the source. So, like the attuned, the symbols, like all this stuff was, again, their heart was in the right place, but it's like, actually, is this a good idea? And thinking about these long-term ramifications. And I think sometimes with other things, like, some other areas, like, obviously I love Zoe. I love her team, whatever she's done, everything she's done. But I think sometimes their desire to make the world building within the cards and the stuff they're doing with the design, and this is more of a Turtles thing, makes it feel a bit less UVS. And it's sometimes you need to remember what UVS actually is, and not lose that wholly within this world. Like, because I think some of the comments I've heard from locals is looking at some of the Turtles cards is they're not really UVS cards, and I think that's a problem.
Is that about what the cards do, or is that just about how the cards look?
No, this is from a design perspective, not like text and shit. Like, this is just from a look and feel. They don't necessarily look and feel like UVS cards, some of them. So I think that, again, but more of a bigger picture, I think there's sometimes need to take a step back of, okay, should we be doing this? I know we can, but should we?
I
because I
mean,
think a lot of the things in AOT have just fucking failed.
okay, I was going to say, we'll get you back on for like a TMNT aspect, because I thought TMNT's design changes for you would have been a massive win, because they're all about accessibility, the white background, the removal of the.
Again, I'm not saying it's not a failure. I think some of those stuff is fine, but I think some of they're just pushing that envelope a bit too far and forgetting about some of the core of what makes universes, what makes it fun, what people love and enjoy about this game, and sometimes losing some of that. And I think that's where they sometimes get lost in their source a little bit of just forgetting that core identity of what makes universes fun, what people enjoy about the game. And for me, and obviously this is where I had the rant on Bake Off, is I think a lot of that part, a big part of the joy is that deck building puzzle and the landscape we had. A lot of that has been lost, and Critical Role brought some of that back, and then it's going again in a turtle. So it's, and also because we've had that yo-yo in design principle, like we don't really know where it's going. Like we don't know what Guilty Gears look like, or the Godzilla set next year, or whatever. We don't know. So it's definitely affected the way I interact with the game. It's definitely affected my locals, and I'd be very surprised if we were the only local group to have felt that impact from AOT, which is why I say I think it's been a fucking disaster. And I think they need to learn from some of these mistakes and almost like admit to them to an extent internally, right? Not necessarily externally, but just say, okay, this didn't work. We need to maybe back away from it and work out how to do that. But again, that's just my opinion.
That
Right?
makes no sense. How about yourself, Cameron?
Definitely kind of a less is more. Back up on Blitz a little bit. Use it more in moderation.
Yeah, I can do it.
Maybe bring. Yeah, I know, get rid of it, but we know they're not going to just do that. So if they are going to eventually phase it out a little bit, Attuned is great in theory, but again, more in moderation. No more fully attuned sets. And I'm not saying like bring back character kits, but maybe like 3 or 4 cards so that the character has a core to start with, and then you can use Attuned to shore up symbol identity and stuff like that, and that can help you bring back all of the set symbols into each set. And yeah, I kind of agree with the whole, sometimes not everything has to feel so engrossed in the world, because then it makes everything feel like different games. Like you have your Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle TCG, you have your My Hero TCG. They don't feel, other than the mechanics of the game, like the same game if they're all trying to envelop themselves in each world exclusively. And you kind of have to have some of that connective tissue a little bit. And I know that the mechanics are kind of the connective tissue, but if they feel like they're different games, I feel like that's kind of a negative.
That makes no sense. So what I'm hearing from the first part of that was more sets like Critical Role.
Yes, more sets like Critical Role. Critical Role was a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I will continue to shout this from the rooftops. Critical Role has been the best design set of the year, and we need more of it. It's all. I think the big takeaway from the changes that were brought in was that they were too intense. Apart from Richard just wanted to scrap them all, it was a case of all or nothing, whereas moderation would have probably been better.
Yeah, don't throw us in the deep end. Let us wade our way in. And they definitely went too much too soon, I think, especially trying to make AOT like the new flagship set, kind of like how they did with My Hero. It just felt like a misstep.
Yeah. Whereas Critical Role, TMNT, and even I'd say Solo Leveling possibly brought on more characters than AOT did. I don't know if you guys would agree with that one. I know Solo Leveling was a very popular, even though it was just a challenger.
Well,
yeah, I definitely had people buy the Solo Leveling deck at my locals, and then dropped shortly thereafter.
Fucking depressing, man. And that's like, I think they need to continue with more joyful and whimsical IPs like Turtles. Like,
well, I mean, that was brought up on Facebook as to how and why UVS gather IPs, and maybe that's something we could talk about in the future. And maybe even try and get in touch with UVS and go through the process of how they acquire IPs and what an IP needs to be on their radar, because that would be a very interesting
without getting
conversation.
into like trade secrets, of course.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I would
yeah.
absolutely be down to have that conversation of like, what's your thought process? You know, how much community input do you take in, and like where do you go around these kinds of things? I would love to
Well,
sit
like,
down
you
with
know,
that
Paul put out
conversation.
the thing, right, of what IPs you want, and we had the IP wish list thing on the Discord, right? And they still haven't got
I forgot
Genshin,
about
so they're
that.
dead to me. So
I mean, Genshin's got its own game now, and I know to end this on Richard signing his deal, he'll never come back. Genshin has plateaued. It's bubbled. It's not as good as it used to be. It's not as popular as it used to be, and it's kind of on its way out.
not even in the slightest.
I think it has. I think it's still popular, but I think it's more popular from the design aspect than a gameplay aspect.
Sure, but it's still like, you know, probably the game in the entire world that makes the most money.
I don't know.
Arguably, HSR might make more, but I'm not sure. But again, a lot of it is, you know, Asian market, which, you know, doesn't really impact us. But like, Hoyo games are fucking huge.
Oh
so,
yeah.
Again, I think if it was realistic, Paul would have done it by now, because, you know, I think he was a Genshin head. But it's just, probably A, they're going to be a nightmare of a licensee to work with, and B, the amount of money it would cost would just be astronomical. So it's going to be a pipe dream. I think it's a game that would, or, you know, as before, it would perfectly work well, but I just think it's.
It also depends on the direction that UVS wants to go, because we're kind of in this turbulent sea of IPs. Again, we can get into some time. We were an anime game, and then we brought back some. Then we went into comics with Godzilla. We went into manga with Attack on Titan. Then we went into fighting games.
Video games with Street Fighter.
Fighting games with Tekken. Then we went into the
They need another smash hit flagship, right? Like MHA was a smash.
I think Critical Role could be that flagship.
Yeah,
it could be. Yeah,
especially if we get in on the ground floor of Campaign 4. This is a brand new world, a brand new system, a brand new characters. If we can get on the ground ship of Campaign 4 and get that stuff going early, that could be absolutely huge for us. And I've been saying that since Campaign 4 was announced.
Yeah. But give me the Villains of Exandria first.
Give me the Crown Keepers. Give me the Crown Keepers.
I'm not there yet.
The main issue is if we get any more Critical Role, we have to introduce a 13th symbol. And that's for Chetney. And
No, we don't.
Yes, we do.
That was a one-off. We don't need to worry about that.
Chetney is not a one-off. Chetney is a big part of Campaign 3, and he is all about wood. His entire thing is wood.
Right. Well,
then he's an Earth character.
I need to go to bed.
Yes,
so do I. About
we're wrapping. Thanks to Cam and Richard for coming here. Depending on my move, depends on when the next episode will be. Keep an eye on Twitter, Blue Sky, and YouTube posts, and I'll try and update as much as I can as to when the next one will be. But big shout out to Richard for being here. Would you like to say goodbye in your own words?
Yeah, thanks everyone. It was fun to be back. Obviously, come down to Hastings, play some Universus.
Yeah, if you're ever in the Hastings area, they can come to where to play?
It is the Board Game Cafe Museum in Old Town in Hastings. So yeah, obviously you can play Universus, but also board games, have a panini, all that good stuff.
Exactly. And big shout out to Cam for always being here and for being an amazing co-host since Richard's departure.
Budget Richard.
Hopefully you'll still be available when I come back off hiatus, but where can they find some more of you?
UVS Hermit on YouTube, and I just got affiliated on Twitch, so you can go over to Twitch. I don't have like a schedule or anything because I hate streaming, but I might start doing that a little bit longer. And yeah, I should be here by the time whenever you come back, and if you'll have me.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to come back. This isn't goodbye forever. This is just basically we're moving house, and I don't know when everything's going to be set up. But thanks for being here. Rich and I are going to head off to bed, and Cam is going to catch up on anime. That is now what I've told you have to do.
I'm going to figure out dinner first.
Probably good idea. We'll catch you
I'm
on a bit.
hungry.
Bye.
Bye. Doodles.
See you.
It would help if I press the extra button.
Keep
Bye.
it in.